today's pros versus AMs video, we're going to talk about a topic that we know a lot of golfers struggle with because we see them every week. It's shoulder rotation and lead arm depth. It's getting the lead arm deep enough with enough shoulder rotation to really allow you to hit the ball more solidly with a lot more speed and a lot more consistency. The AM we chose for today's video is very representative of what we regularly see with regards to shoulder turn and arm depth in the swing. Tony here came to us because he was frustrated with his ability to, as he put it, wind up in the backswing. He felt like his inability to wind up was really hindering his ability to generate speed. He told us after retiring, and Tony's 68, that he stretched every day and worked out 3 times a week. And he felt like that he should be turning more and hitting it farther than the quote unquote couch potatoes, his words, that he played with on a regular basis. And, you know, he was right.
All right, Mike. So I know probably everybody's thinking what I'm thinking. You know, we're looking at something a little bit different here this time with our pros versus AMs, the avatars.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody would notice. So one of the things that we've always wanted to do, and we probably used at one point or another every 3D system on the market. And they all have their pluses and minuses, but what we haven't been able to find, and something that we've always wanted to be able to do, is to isolate different body movements, set them up like if you wanted to see wrist angle on the backswing, let's say, you could just be able to show that's how the wrist moves in the backswing rather than trying to see it throughout the whole motion. So with our new AMG 3D system, we're able to isolate the golfer's movements, right? We capture the swing, isolate the movements. In this case, we're putting his arms on a level plane so it's easy to see, and show you exactly how his arms and shoulders move throughout the golf swing. And I think it's a pretty unique way to see how these movements happen. I think it's going to be beneficial for a lot of folks. One of our favorite things about AMG 3D is the ability to change the player's avatar to best suit what we're trying to see. In Tony's case, a more anatomically correct look at the shoulders will be a big help for us today. But I don't think we're going to need to see the muscles, so let's turn those off. The head's going to be in the way too, so let's turn it off as well. And let's also remove all the neck vertebrae and disc, except for the last one, C7. We'll use that for reference later, so let's light it up green. And while we're at it, let's also turn on the shoulder bones, which are the collarbone, the shoulder blade, and the arm bone. As you can tell, we like to use very precise medical terms. All right, so we've got our shoulder and spinal references turned on. This should give us a real clear picture of what the shoulders do in Tony's before swing, the pro swing, and then we'll take a look at Tony's after swing.
All right, Mike. So we've talked about lead arm adduction a lot in the past, and we did a video last year that got a lot of questions. And what makes this avatar different in what we're able to show?
Yeah, so the pros versus AMs video we're talking about was about lag, and then we showed towards the end of the video, we showed how the lead arm moves between amateurs and pros. And a lot of folks had a hard time understanding and just grasping how that could be possible, that the pros move their lead arm a small amount, everyone else moves it a good amount, especially when you see swings on video.
Right.
Now that we have the tool to be able to show you how that happens, how it's measured, I think it's going to make a lot more sense to you and really start to connect the dots with how you can start to apply those pro movements to your own golf swing. Tony had also seen that video, and he also wasn't sure how those numbers were measured or how they could be applied to his swing. This is how we explained it to him. There are basically 2 primary ways golfers move their lead arm across their bodies. Number 1, and this is how Tony was doing it. It's also how the vast majority of amateur golfers we captured do it as well. The image you see here is how he described how he thought the lead arm should move across the chest in the backswing. He wanted to keep his back relatively flat, left shoulder feeling like it's connected, and pull his hand as far across his chest as possible in order to get as much depth as possible in his backswing. So it takes 3 points to make an angle. And the 3 points we're going to use for measuring this are the C7 vertebrae in green, the shoulder joint, and the bottom of the humerus. In this demonstration, and just like Tony was trying to do, the golfer is only thinking of movement from the shoulder joint. As you see, that produces a big decrease in our starting angle. This idea largely stems from the perception that the shoulders and chest somehow move together or are connected during the swing. And there's probably no doubt that you've heard the 2 terms, shoulder turn and chest turn, being used interchangeably over the years, which just adds more to the confusion. If that's also your perception of what happens, this is what will drive your attempt at depth in the swing. And if you're a golfer that struggles with keeping their lead arm straight in the swing, also notice how the elbow breaks down when the upper arm runs into the chest. That elbow breakdown is very common with golfers who use this pattern as their primary source of achieving depth. Now let's look at the second way. This is how the data shows us the pros do it. Starting from the exact same angle, you're now going to see the hand move across the chest with next to zero movement of the arm. The only movement you're seeing here is from the joint where the collarbone attaches to the sternum. This is referred to as scapular protraction or shoulder protraction. Simply put, it's when the shoulder blade slides forward away from the spine. There's a good bit of range of motion from this movement, and it alone can move the lead arm across your chest without any help from the arm, as you can see. In each freeze frame here, there hasn't been any elbow bend, nor has there been any movement across the chest from the arm. This has all been accomplished by lead shoulder protraction and all within the normal ranges of motion. From a normal 2D angle, there's no way of seeing what's causing the motion you see when a player's hand moves across his body. There's one more thing we want to show you with how the lead arm and shoulder move. Something else we see in pro swings, and I don't recall any exceptions off the top of my head, is that this adduction angle is increasing through roughly the first half of the backswing, the opposite of what we see in the chest-shoulder connection pattern. Your arm and shoulder bones are only attached to your skeletal frame at one small point, right here where the collarbone attaches to the sternum. Your swing will be significantly limited if you don't take advantage of the movement this joint provides. So with that in mind, let's go back to Tony's movements. He was actually doing what he thought he should be doing. Very little protraction here at setup, but just enough so he can sole the club on the ground. As his backswing gets going, you can see how much he's using his lead arm and elbow to create his depth, and how little he's using his shoulder. We find that golfers are pretty good at doing what they think should happen. Tony here was no exception. Notice how close his hands are now to his trail shoulder. He got his depth, but at a very heavy expense. And we'll come back to that more in a minute. Based on Tony's physical size and desired shot shape, this is the pro we use to help show him and help reshape, really, his ideas of how the shoulders and arms should work. We literally could have blindly picked any pro from the database, and he would have seen something very similar. At setup, notice how he's already tapping into more shoulder protraction than what we saw from Tony. Then he starts adding more protraction right away as his swing gets going. This allows him to need half the shoulder adduction to create his depth. That's huge, because look at how far his left hand is from his right shoulder compared to what we saw with Tony and how close his left hand was to his right shoulder. All right, so now let's turn off the skin layer so we can really get a clear picture of the differences when we overlap their movements. Quite a stark difference. Tony had half the shoulder protraction with twice the shoulder adduction, which resulted in twice the elbow bend. Or you can look at it like the pro had twice the shoulder protraction with half the adduction and half the elbow bend as a result. I think it was one of the great classic Greek philosophers that said, one shoulder does not make a shoulder turn. So now let's bring T's right shoulder and arm to life so we can see the final piece of his puzzle. We're also adding in a few rods for reference. One connecting his shoulders, creatively named the shoulder rod, and we're going to run a rod straight through his chest. Using this rod for reference is a great way to see how his combined shoulder and arm movements relate to the chest. And that's really the main thing here, seeing how the shoulders move relative to the chest. It's just way easier to see if we lock the chest down and show the shoulder movements around that fixed chest. Because of everything we talked about with Tony's left shoulder, he needs a good bit more trail shoulder protraction just to get his trail hand lower on the grip. You can see how that necessity causes his shoulders to be roughly 5 degrees open to his chest here at address. Now pay close attention to his right shoulder here as we start his backswing. Notice just how little that shoulder retracts as he takes the club back. Keep in mind, this is what he was trying to do. Turn his shoulders and chest as one big powerful unit. Only problem was he wasn't getting the turn or the power. And here he is at the end of his shoulder turn. I remember this very clearly because it's rare that we see a golfer match his age to his shoulder turn. Tony had 67 degrees of chest turn with 68 degrees of shoulder turn. His very well executed concept netted him just 1 extra degree of shoulder turn on top of his chest turn. Because his left hand is now so close to his right shoulder, he's forced to have 120 degrees of right arm bend. This folded right arm and lack of width is a killer for the downswing. So right off the bat, his concept of how to turn was the thing killing his turn and his distance. Because our pro had a more protracted left shoulder, he didn't need as much protraction with his right shoulder. So his shoulders were about half as open as Tony's were at address. As he gets moving in his backswing, notice now how his right shoulder is retracting way more than what we just saw. See how his shoulder rod now is essentially rotating around the middle of that vertebrae we have highlighted. If you saw our last pros versus AMs video on hip rotation and thrust, you saw a very similar movement from the pros with their pelvises rotating around their center as well. You can also see how the combination of protracting his left shoulder with the retraction of his right creates a double-digit amount of rotation on top of his chest rotation. 13 degrees in this case. Double digits is what we're shooting for, but we have pros in our database that get into the 20s. This lets our pro have just 70 degrees of right arm bend, a whopping 50 less than what we saw in Tony's swing. That space created by needing less left shoulder adduction and less right arm bend is what produces a large amount of width to his backswing, something you absolutely want in your golf swing. So it's one thing to point out the differences between what AMs typically do compared to what pros typically do. But Tony didn't go through all the hassle and expense of flying down just to be shown the differences. He had the same question you probably do right now. At 40 years his senior, how much of what the pro was doing could Tony now apply to his swing? Let's find out. So the first thing we did, we wanted to see how much mobility he had in his shoulders. We gave him a very simple movement to find this out. We had him hold his 7-iron out in front of him in his left hand, kind of middle of the club, just like he was holding a bow. Then we had him pull his right arm back like he was pulling the bow back to load an arrow, or, loading an arrow to shoot. We wanted him to really feel like he was opening his chest and pulling that shoulder blade back as he pulled his right arm back to load that arrow. This was his range of motion doing that little Robin Hood test. And do it right there where you're sitting. But keep in mind, we still only have his shoulders and arms turned on, so it looks much different probably than what you're doing without the chest movement. But notice how much his left shoulder protracts and his right shoulder retracts. He's showing a pretty big range of motion here, and way more than what his concept was letting him do in his own swing. And next we had him feel those same shoulder movements, like pulling a bow back, only now without bending the right elbow to help pull his right shoulder back. Now, if you're doing this at home, your range of motion is going to be less doing it this way, but it's going to be much closer to how the shoulders and arms move during the backswing. He actually surprised himself by seeing how much range of motion he still had compared to what he was using in his swing. We did this for several minutes, gradually working the same feel in with his normal backswing movements. So adding, hip turn, chest turn, all that, gradually adding those things in. Then we started working it with the club. So he was doing it well without any turning. Then he added the turn. Now we added the club. So he's now making it with the club in hand. Then eventually we started adding the golf ball. And this is what he finished with at the end of the lesson. He went from plus 1 degree of shoulder turn to plus 11 degrees. He went from just over 30 degrees of lead arm adduction to just 18. He went from 120 degrees of right arm bend down to 86. His hips started at 49 degrees at the top of his swing. Those reduced 3 down to 46. He went from 67 degrees of chest turn to 77 degrees. Adding all that together was the exciting part for him because his shoulder turn went from 68 degrees to 88 degrees, which led him to a 7.5 mile an hour jump in his 7-iron swing speed. Now, he told us that the physical part of this was surprisingly easy once he understood the concept and then how that concept was applied. Tony was a blast to work with. He came in with a great attitude and was excited to learn how to move like he felt he should be moving. And like a lot of golfers that come to see us, he was afraid that it was going to be his age that ultimately kept his swing declining. The key for Tony was learning to move his left side better so he could unlock this fountain of youth that was hiding in his right side. Now, Father Time is undefeated, but we find that poor concepts can make you move and feel like you're much older than you actually are. So that's pretty much it, right? That's the concept. That's how we put it in practice. And if you've seen our live lessons, that's how we do it in the live lessons. Shaun will actually get the golfer, take him to the top of the backswing, and physically put him there. Yeah, so most of the time these guys will take it back, or gals, and they'll have their torso turn some, but this shoulder is forward in the socket. It's fully protracted, right? The right one. Mm-hmm. What I'll do is I'll pull their left and push their right back. So I do that same motion we just showed in the video. I do it all the time in lessons. I roll this shoulder this way. I pull the right shoulder back. Now I've got greater width in my right arm. I've got the right shoulder pulled back. I've got the left shoulder protracted forward. And that gives them all this room and it transforms a downswing like that. Yeah, and it's like we call it the fifth gear in the golf swing because it adds really another layer of dynamic movement on top of your torso turn. And it's a great way to pick up distance, speed, consistency. Not only that, if you have a steep downswing, big time. It's instant. I mean, and you've seen it in some of our other videos. I'll get someone to the top that's swinging the club like this. I'll get in there, make them stop, pull their shoulder blade back, get this one where it should be in kind of a cross. I mean, they almost can't make a steep downswing from there. You want to talk about shallowing the club? That's the true way to. That's a great way to shallow the club. That's why the width to this is so important. Like everyone talks about depth online, it's the width of the swing, which you can't really see on video. That's right. From that down the line view. It's keeping that right shoulder, right elbow from overbending. That allows you to get so many benefits on the downswing when you do it this way. So give that a try. Do the bow, do the Robin Hood test, do all that. Give it a try. Add more shoulder protraction, add less shoulder abduction to your golf swing. I think you'll see a much wider, much more turned golf swing because of it. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did enjoy it, go ahead and give it a like. Also, if you have any questions about today's video or you have an idea of a video that you want us to shoot, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. We read every single comment. We also respond to the comments. So again, leave us a comment if you have any questions or there's anything you'd like to see. Now, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button. We have videos coming out every single week and we don't want you to miss one. So by clicking subscribe, that ensures you're notified right away when a new video comes out. And hey, if you want to add instant distance to your drive, and we all do, everybody wants more distance, go ahead and click the link in the pinned comment below. You're going to see a link. Click on it. It's going to take you to a page. You're going to enter your name and email address. We're going to send you an email where you're going to get access to instant distance, which is a video training that we put out. We know it's going to help you. We know we're going to see you farther down the fairway.